Okay, welcome Vladimir. Welcome people to 69 Agile Humans Meetup. The floor is yours, and guys, enjoy.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today and tonight with all of you. So I'm assuming you all are passionate about product backlog, that you use product backlogs, and that you would like to up your game as far as your product backlog management for yourself, and yeah, maybe for the people or the organization around you, which you might be coaching. So this will be our topic for tonight. Yeah, so like I said, I'm really happy to be here, and hopefully you'll be able to generate some value out of this session tonight. We are not the biggest group, so I think we can feel free to make this as interactive as possible, as Alexander said, so it should be like an informal coffee conversation. So let me know your questions. I have some agenda prepared with some questions for you guys, so your input will be welcomed. And yeah, I hope you're into this kind of a session where we'll be interacting throughout the presentation. So hi everyone. So we have people from the UK, from
United
Greece,
States, oh,
from Los Angeles. Okay, that's nice. Hawaii as well.
Hawaii. Oh, hello, Hawaii. We
Super
missed
stuff.
you.
Okay, nice. So thanks for introducing yourself. All right. So maybe just a quick word on the title to make sure we have that. Now I should see the title of the presentation.
Yep.
So yeah, if you're using a product backlog for a product, maybe we should highlight that. So if you're working on developing a product, and you like to elevate your great game in the area of product backlog management, then yeah, you're at the right place. So let me just share some contact details. And Alexander, thank you for introduction. You have pretty much covered everything. But yeah, maybe just in short, I've been in the software development industry for quite a bit. I consider myself to be a Scrum geek. And I also assume if you use a product backlog that you're involved in some kind of Scrum practice or at least Agile practice of some sort. So yeah, I help people and teams and organizations in that regard by consulting or delivering Scrum.org certified classes. You can find there my contact details, the email, and the QR code will leave you to my LinkedIn profile. So yeah, let's kick us off with this one simple question. And Alexander, if it would be okay to use the whiteboard for our interaction.
Of course. Now I'm going to turn on the whiteboard. So, guys, feel free to write in the chat if you can access the whiteboard and if you can collaborate in it. So here it is. Yep.
So let me just put up the question there. I'll see if I can add a sticky note.
I will try the same. Yeah, I managed. Okay, I see
Super.
a lot of people
So
here. It should be good.
in 3 words or less, please share your view on what the product backlog is.
What is a product backlog?
Yeah, just in simplest terms. Alexander, I should be able to summon people to myself or something like that. Just make sure that everyone is in the right place because I'm not sure if everyone can access.
Well, just give me a second.
Okay, someone is using the chat.
Yeah, someone is using the chat. I think they're all at one place, if I'm not wrong. It seems everything is okay.
Okay, so feel free to share your inputs. You can place them below the question. So book of work, container for product related tasks. I see that in the chat. Just move this one. A to-do list. It sounds simple. I like that. Okay, so you can give us a shout if you're not able to interact with the board. Just if you want to use an alternative way. Yeah, container. Yeah. So we see that it's pretty much means different things for different people. You might argue that that depends on the organization, the region, the country where, where Agile and Scrum is being practiced. But different things, right? So you might say that it's an emergent ordered list. And what we have in the Scrum guide, which is always my go-to place, go-to resource when I teach and consult Scrum. So we know that the product owner is accountable for maximizing the value of the product. That's from the Scrum guide. And the product owner is accountable for effective product backlog management, which would mean communicating the product goal and defining and communicating the product backlog items and ordering the product backlog items. And also ensuring that the product backlog is transparent, visible, and understood. But one trouble with that is that we don't know how. And for a while I was first practicing Scrum, I was aware of these definitions, but I wasn't able to help. I mean, when I practiced Scrum as a Scrum Master, I wasn't able actually to help my product owner or my product ownership or product management organization with these things. So all I could do is tell them, okay, this is your job, but I wasn't able, to help them beyond that. So let's dig deeper into this definition. So I would completely agree with the definition, but I'd like us to dig deeper and just see if we can add on to that. So here comes the next question. So it said, the Scrum Guide says product backlog should be kept transparent. So what is for you product backlog transparency? Let me add that. See if we can agree on that. So what is product backlog transparency? What does that mean for you? That it's accessible? Okay. Alexander, while the participants are writing, can you check the question in the chat? Someone seems to be asking about the link. I'm
Yeah,
not
of
sure if we can
course,
just
and I
provide the
already
link.
did it.
Oh,
Yeah,
super.
don't worry, I
Great.
did it. I answered that.
Great. So that it's visible, that it's accessible. Okay. And the Scrum team and stakeholders and everyone pretty much are able to see the future work. Yeah, I like those. And also see in the chat, shared understanding. So those are good words, right? So another question might be asked, to whom is the transparency aimed? To whom does it serve? And pretty much we here learned that it's pretty much for everyone, the Scrum team, the stakeholders, and the wider organization, and that it's accessible and visible, right? Yeah, so those are all good. And those will be completely right. So let me move on with the next sort of assignment. Could I ask everyone to create a personal to-do list about preparing for vacation? So if you now picture that next Monday you'll be leaving for vacation, what comes to mind? Can you create an itemized list for your upcoming vacation? You can use one sticky maybe now for more items. Maybe that's yeah, that will be more visible to everyone. Let's just work on that for a minute or so. So yeah, you would think of things like create the packing list for everything you might need, right? Then you would probably pack those things. Oh, here's one bulleted list coming up, or numbered list. Yeah, I love what's appearing there. So we can see that we again mean different things as with the product backlog. So some people are thinking, okay, what do I need before I leave? And then some people went immediately to, okay, what am I going to do when I get there as maybe the first ordered thing, right? And already create an itinerary and book excursions and so forth. So I don't know if you guys can see my presentation now. Alexander, I don't know if we can now switch.
Well, we can try. We can try. Be free to
Let's
try.
see. Yeah. Okay, I should share again. Okay. No. While collaborating on a whiteboard, you cannot share screen. So you might want
Okay.
to maybe
Okay.
just discontinue.
Okay. Yeah. Guys, when you finish putting your thoughts in the whiteboard, then I'm going to turn off just because Vladimir is going to show something on presentation, then we can always come back to it. So
Yeah, we will, because we'll have more inputs required. Oh, weather just came up there on the list. So yeah, you might want to check the weather because it might depend what you will bring, right, on the weather.
okay, I think now we are free to go back to your presentation, Vladimir.
Yep. Thanks for that. So I hope this got you thinking about your to-do list for a vacation, right? So you probably came up with something like this, right? Maybe for myself, when I just stick it on the fridge, I would put up a title. And yeah, it would be these type of things, right? So see about accommodation and transportation, maybe checks for some travel insurance, prepare clothes. And again, you would adjust that to maybe the size of the suitcase that you're able to carry with you. So it really depends on the airline company, right? Of the size. Just recently, when I flew, we had these two sizes, which appeared a bit unordinary to me. So 20 and 30 kilograms. Yeah, then book a transfer to airport and from the airport, maybe a car rental for those exact dates, because for the rental you need to put down exact dates, and then yeah, do the seat and luggage check-in on a specific day, right? So we had some time-bound items there because some airlines, especially some, are really strict about not doing the online check-in, right? They want to charge you when you get to the airport if you didn't do the check-in, right? But as someone mentioned, it's like a to-do list, right? And it's not very prescriptive, right? And it's just simple items, 2, 3 words at most, per item, and it has a title. But we can see that this is what actually makes sense. Now, I'd like to ask you to compare the product backlogs you're working off now. So how do they compare with a list like this? And in my case, uh, it's nothing like this list. It doesn't have a sequence. Typically, this is why we need, to be more effective with product backlog management. There isn't context there. You cannot just get the context. So it's really specific to the person who wrote the item, right? And then we said we want the product backlog to be transparent pretty much to everyone, to our key stakeholders, to the organization, to all the people on our Scrum team, right? Maybe even to our users, right? But yeah, we can compare our product backlogs to a list like this. So there's a title, there's items which are context-based. Some of them are dependent on other stuff, such as weather, such as airline suitcase allowance, baggage allowance. Some have date dependencies, right, which we need to nail down at this moment as we speak, right? Yeah, just something to think about. Product backlog, to-do list. It should be as simple as that. So if it isn't, you might want to think about how you can simplify it. So yeah, let's move on to the next question. I'll just display it here, and then we can move back to the whiteboard, Alexander, if that's okay. So let's answer this question. What types of items do you have on your product backlog? Just to check on that. So if you
Give me a
can bring up
second.
the whiteboard. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's appearing. I don't know if the previous items are there, but even if they aren't, it
I think
doesn't
they're
matter
not.
that
I
much.
think, yeah, it created a new whiteboard. I
Okay.
tried to give an existing one, but somehow it
Okay.
appears with a new one.
Okay, no worries. Let's see. So let me just put up the question. What type of items? Let me just sort them. So yeah, we see good stuff appearing, right? Stories and bugs and defects. Action. Yeah, Haven't seen that one to be common, but I like the sound of it. Improvement item spikes. Yeah, pretty much all of those are good. Let's see if another one might appear, which isn't there yet. Now we have the usual suspect, right? The stories, I assume that stands for user stories, right? But yeah, those are good, but it's important to highlight that not all items need to be of type user story, right? Oh, there was an interesting one. Epic, right? Epic is also good. Maybe that we can add experiment. I assume spike would be some sort of experiment, like to discover, explore some technology or an approach to implementing something. Typically, that's what spike stands for where I come from. We also sometimes call stuff experiments. And there we had a nice breakdown. So someone even wrote a structure, right? I assume that's epics, and then those will be broken down to stories and then tasks and subtasks. And again, experiments. Oh, discovery. That's an interesting one. And then someone wrote very detailed. It could be, right? But it doesn't have to be. We saw in the case of a to-do list, if we really know everything about what we need to know, then it doesn't have to be very detailed. But yeah, sometimes details don't hurt, and we'll talk about some details in a minute. But for instance, when I spoke with my wife because we organized our vacation for our family, and then I asked her, like, can you look into the airline tickets? And then the next day she said, yeah, I have everything, organized. And then I asked, what's the price? And then she said, well, it's about, that was around 1,500 euros. And I said, hey, I wasn't aware that it's going to be that much because last year it was about 500 less. But yeah, so maybe that was just situation at the time, like, there's a seasonality to the airline tickets. But anyways, maybe if I had written down, like, okay, check the airline tickets, and the last year they were about 1,000, she might have, searched further. She might not have, gone for the 1,500 immediately. So yeah, sharing the understanding and sharing the context actually is really helpful, right? But sometimes it's simply not described. There's tech debt, a new one. That's okay. It depends how much your stakeholders like the word tech debt. In some situations, stakeholders have been known to really resent the term. Typically, I mean, not typically, but for some of them, it stands for the system. There's no new functionality. It's just developers. If you're working in a digital product development area, developers will be working on something, but no new features will be delivered. But yeah, so tech debts or improvements, which so I like improvements better, which is on the other list. I'm just checking the chat. Okay. I have a quote, but let's not switch back, not to lose any of the inputs from the whiteboard. But it says, the most important information in a requirements document are not the requirements, but the phone number of the person who wrote it. And that's a thought by Ron Jeffries, if you know Ron Jeffries. from 2008, which really points to this aspect of the context, right? Sometimes the requirements document can be super detailed, right? But you can understand it in the wrong way. And it's much better to actually align with the person, make sure that the understanding is proper, that it's mutual, right? That it's shared before going on and implementing something. Because it could be that the writer or the author of the requirement just simply had other things in mind, as I did with this item on my to-do list, like, okay, book airline tickets, but I forgot to leave out, yeah, and make sure that they're below 1,000 euros. Let's take another question and then we can summarize this section. What would you say? We've touched on this a little bit, but let me just put it in a different way. How would you answer this? What is the purpose of the product backlog? So we said what it is. How would you answer this? But what is the purpose of the product backlog? Acceptance criteria is needed with each type of backlog item. Okay. So some more appearing. Single source of work. Yeah, you could say single source of truth for the Scrum team, right? That is if you work while using Scrum. Yeah, so single source of work for everything which needs to be developed and improved. Organization of tasks, that's nicely put. So product backlog is a desirement. That sounds interesting. I'm not really sure what all is meant by that, but yeah, those could be desires, description of desires. Helps visualize work that needs to be done, prioritize those with most value. Could be. You might argue that risk might be another criteria, so not just value or effort could also be a significant one. But yeah, in the end, addressing the risk or avoiding the risk might present high value, right? But so yeah, some type of value is always good to be kept in mind as you work on your product backlog. Yeah, so those are all good, but yeah, in simplest terms, you might say that a product backlog is an invitation to a conversation. Because if you think about how transparency comes about, it's pretty much from the conversations which take place about product backlog items. In other words, which you wrote, we could say that it has a function of a roadmap. So a roadmap or some kind of plan towards our goal or a vision. In Scrum terms, we'll be speaking about achieving a more longer term goal, which would be a product goal. And we might say that it's a plan to maximize the value of the product. And next to the one, organization of tasks so that everyone in team knows all tasks, we might add that it's a tool to provide transparency, but to all of our stakeholders, right? Its purpose is also to be clear on what's going to be done as far as improving and developing a product. So just open up a slide for myself. Let's not switch between presentations, but yeah, this might was what my slides has. So single source of truth for all the work, provides a transparent picture to stakeholders, acts as a roadmap for those invested in the outcome of the product. So we also bring in the word here, outcome. You might also get a sense of the value of the work through ordering of PBIs. On purpose, we don't say priority because you might have things which are of equal priority. The typical case is everything is priority number one, but we need to have an order. Otherwise, we could get lost in working on multiple things at the same time. So we're not that big of a group. Do you have maybe a reflection on anything which was said so far, or maybe a question that we can address together? You can put it in writing, or you might as well unmute and just let us know.
Hi, I was thinking about your last statement, about referring to it as ordered work rather than priority. But if you order a piece of work, then the one at the top is obviously the one with the highest priority, right?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for noticing that. Sure. But it depends on definition. If you go to what we call a key stakeholder, it could be a business person, you might get a list of 10 items, or you might be asked to put on 10 product backlog items on your product backlog. And if you ask the person, what's the priority, you might get an answer, oh, all of those are top priority, right? So you might get 10 prior one items, right, to work on, right?
Yeah.
But in your product backlog, they need to be ordered, right? So you might argue that we have a priority on the product backlog and the priority of the person who might be requesting an item.
Right. Okay.
Because I've seen teams which don't actually apply this difference in those terms, and they say, oh, we're working on these 10 priority one items at the same time. That's not good. So we need to have focus. If we are sort of forced to order the items, right, then we actually know, which is the first item which needs to be finished. And it's a kind of it's a process thing where we want the people to be finishing individual items rather than on working on multiple items at the same time and, get into a situation where they might not finish any of those. They just started the work. And yeah, in my experience, just sort of insisting on the order, that there's no two same order items of the product backlog, actually brings up interesting discussions. Sometimes you learn that maybe not all the prior one items are actually top priority, even though the person thought they were. And yeah, sometimes you need to make tough decisions because you always have limited resources, right? So we need to actually define what's the, number one item, number two, number three, and so forth. So yeah, hope that answers the question.
Before I gave the word to our dear Ricky, I would just want to read the questions from Victor. He wrote that in the chat. So when you say it is an invitation for conversation, do you mean the items in the backlog are still subject to discussion and change?
Yeah.
And then we go to Ricky, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Victor, for your question. I'm not sure what you mean by still, but yeah, in my world, when the sprint is started, the product backlog items shouldn't be negotiable, right? Because the sprint is typically what, 2-3 weeks. So we want to make sure that the actual item or the purpose of an item, the value of the item is actually defined in the last responsible moment, which is sprint planning in my world. So beyond that, I won't be discussing those items. But yeah, you get exceptions, so nothing is written in stone, right? So you might be approached by a stakeholder, and a very important one, and they might say, hey, I don't need that to be done in that way, I need it to be changed. But again, we need to insist on some things, and in case of a Scrum team, it would be the sprint goal. So if it doesn't alter or impact the sprint goal, then it's even okay at that time to negotiate the scope of a product backlog item. But for everything else, right, we only take up as much items in our sprint planning for our sprint. So everything which is not selected for the sprint in sprint planning is still negotiable, right? And we want to have conversation because it brings transparency. We want to be as close to the people who are actually requesting our product backlog items. And that's how we ensure shared understanding. So I hope
can
that
be
answers.
achieved? Can that be achieved during the refinements as well, the negotiation?
Yep. Yeah, we'll get to refinement. That's a really good question, Idris. We'll get to refinement in a lot of detail. So yeah, let's just get back to that question. So let's take another one from Ricky.
Can we just include Ricky? She's raising her hand, so
Yeah,
let's answer her question.
Ricky, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. You know, as a product owner and a product manager, it's keeping your eye on the initiatives or the overall business goals and then the objectives to deliver those goals. As a product owner and a product manager is managing that backlog with the highest value to the business. And if we focus our attention to adding value and delivering value to the business, it then highlights how to prioritize that backlog. And I know that we'll be talking about planning and refinement, but it really goes into when it comes into that sprint, making sure that as part of that planning that it can be further refined because now you're getting closer to actually doing the work. So things from the time it was created to the time you're actually going to work, there's things that have changed. And that's where the really close relationship with the business comes in. It's instrumental to delivering the high value that they're expecting. And it's being able to really pull that understanding as to why they're asking for those things, what's the expected results that they're looking for, rather than trying to have them give us the solution.
Yeah, that's a great thought. So we want to be as close as possible to our stakeholders, although there is a subtle thing in ordering the product backlog items. Which is so there's energy, there's forces at play, right? So we only have limited time and we only have limited capacity. And I know, Ricky, that in a role of a product owner or a product manager, you need to select things. You cannot deliver everything what's requested of you because typically there's more demand than capacity to deliver, right? So ordering the items actually means sometimes having hard conversations and making tough decisions, which mean that sometimes you need to decline a request or simply postpone it, right? But we want to do that as openly as possible, right? This is why we say that product backlog should be kept transparent. Just as another extreme, or the opposing extreme to that, is that simply the stakeholders are not aware of your product backlog or how they can see it, what's the ordering of the product backlog items. And when you just tell them, okay, I'll put your items on the product backlog, their expectation is that you're going to start and work on those immediately. So yeah, let's just keep an eye on the ordering, and yeah, let's be as transparent as possible. I know, yeah, that's a great one. Sometimes you need to say no, or as we say, not now, right? But yeah, you cannot be a great product owner if you say yes to everything, right? To every request. And mind you, I loved your point about the value for the product and for the business, because we need to see what the highest value is for our product and for our company's success. It doesn't mean that the highest paid or the highest ranking person's opinion is of the biggest value for our organization, right? We get that sometimes, right? So we need to actually see, and especially if you work in a product manager role, that you need to gauge and you need to measure each investment that you make on the outcome of our product. So yeah, ordering really matters. I hope that that aligns with your view, Ricky. Okay, let's move on a little bit. So next question, who are your users? Could you just share some examples of your users? I'm putting up the question. It's in the column to the right of what we've been writing so far. Yep. Okay, so the current question we're trying to address is, who are your users? If you want to just provide some input from your context. Okay, so thank you for those who have shared their inputs. So yeah, we see it's good to know who your users are. And also one so to say, this function of when it comes to product backlog is that the stakeholders and even the team who's working off of that product backlog are not aware of the users, just who their end users are. Mind you, it happens to me all the time, but just I have this thing in mind that we need to be aware of the users, and the product team, the Scrum team, needs to be aware of those users and ideally talking to them frequently. And yeah, if we don't know them, then we can take some action and actually discover who our users are, right? So if you make your users known to your team and to your stakeholders, your product backlog will come more transparent. So that's the notion here. And you might want to use some techniques such as discovering user personas or proto-personas. You might use stuff like user role modeling together with your team, just to make sure that the users are known. Because you're building, as I mentioned, if you're working on building a product, it's good to have the end user in mind, right? And there's all kinds of techniques which you can explore if you haven't so far. So besides those which we mentioned, you can use customer interviews. You might do stuff like observation of users and simply talking to them. And there was a question before, like, is it good to do some ordering or discussion about the priority in the product backlog refinement? Yeah, that would be totally cool. But you can also invite users to your product backlog refinement. As you're discovering and validating the value of your product backlog items, you might as well invite your users to your product backlog refinement. So if you aren't, that's a good idea for an action to take. So check who your users are, and if you're not working close to them, just check in your wider organizations who are all the types of users which are using your product. And yeah, use these various techniques to discover and get to know your users well. I hope that makes sense. Yes, Ricky, thank you for that. So focus groups are also good. Yeah, so anything you can think of or anything you can discover, any technique or method, but be close to your users. I'd say in my surrounding, a typical setting is that software developers, they're not very fond of actually speaking to users. So they just want implement code, right? Implement technology. But then we need to work with them and bring it to their attention and, just bringing closer the end user perspective to their work. But yeah, something to keep in mind. Know who your users are. If you don't know, just do something about that and get closer to them. And as you can imagine, we have another question to work on together. Although I don't know, in the previous questions we had more inputs. I don't know if people have dropped off, but yeah, I hope you're enjoying the conversation so far. So the next question for you is, where do your product backlog items come from? So next question. So let's give it another minute. So yeah, those are some ideas: customer feedback and customer requests, right? We've mentioned pretty much, we've mentioned business, we've mentioned stakeholders, right? End users, so those are all good. We might have, okay, some inputs are coming up now. Yeah, product owner is a good person to come up with product backlog items, right? Yeah, a good one on the chat. So yeah, let's make sure that we use the feedback from sprint reviews and reflect that in our product backlog. That's an aspect of adapting in Scrum by updating the product backlog actually. But yeah, all those are good. I like all of those. So end users, stakeholders, customers. We might get people like legal, right? When where I work, GDPR and those kind of data protection and handling regulations were a big thing at some point 4 or 5 years ago. Then legal and compliance had a big stake in handling of those data, right? So you might also get subject matter experts. You might get architects who might have an influence. You might have security people. You might get, I don't know if we have developers on there, but yeah, developers are typically, we mentioned tech debt previously, but developers also often a source for product backlog items and requirements, right? And let's move on. Next question. Who are your stakeholders? Can you just name one or two that come to mind first when you refer to the term stakeholder? Yeah, so I love all of those: leadership and project managers, customers. I assume SMEs, subject matter expert, and users. Yeah. Yeah, clients. Yeah. It's good to know who are your stakeholders, and I would encourage you to explore some techniques for actually mapping your stakeholders. I've done recently an exercise with my product owner, and we saw that the interaction in the sprint review wasn't at best level. And then we did the little exercise, which is called the stakeholder map. And as you do that, you simply raise awareness with the people around you that not all of the stakeholders are the same. So there's this tool which is called the stakeholder map, or the stakeholder mind map. I can recommend to explore those. And you might get, so it's again 2x2 schema, or you just have 4 quadrants, and those contain the promoters, the defenders, the audience, and the latents based on their interest or they stake in the product, and on other axis you would have the influence over the product. And what we did is we actually mapped those stakeholders into that diagram and actually shared it with all of them, and they loved it. Because none of them need to be at each of the sprint reviews. And I've seen a lot of teams who invite all of the stakeholders, like, let's invite 20 people, but only 5 show up. Why? Well, because they don't have that big of a stake in the product. So you will help the transparency of your product backlog if you actually map out your stakeholders by using any of the techniques out there. There's 2 or 3 which are really great. And you need to kind of adjust your communication and interaction frequency levels depending on the group to which your stakeholders belong to. Let me know if you have any questions or reflections in that area. Otherwise, I will move on with the next aspect. You can unmute or just raise a hand. Let me write this in the meantime. So we mentioned goals a while ago. So what is the current goal that you're working on? you're okay with sharing some. Just put up an example. So you might recognize this goal. You might be able to guess who might have used it. But yeah, goals are important. Again, a lot of teams and a lot of product backlogs somehow just misplace a higher level goal or a longer term goal that they're working on. And then again, it undermines the transparency of your product backlog. So if you don't actually have a goal in mind as you do the work while developing your product, you can consider checking out what's the currently active goal that there is in your team, in your organization, in your product ownership organization. There is this notion, and you might have come across it. It's called it's from a German terminology, and it's called Auftragstaktik, which stands for mission-based control, and it comes from the military, where the military leaders, the officers, have discovered that if they only give their soldiers plans or commands to follow, if there's a change in the plan or change in the circumstances, they get lost unless they know the intent. So this is one really important notion of actually being aware of the goal and making sure that the intent is there. I can share another one. And as I do it, you might unmute and tell me, do you have a goal in mind if you are in a role of a product owner or working on developing a product at the moment? Yes, no.
Well, for me, Vladimir, it's difficult to come up with any goal because usually we have around like 5 goals for one team, and I somehow assume that the goal should come up from the management, the main one, and then adjusted by a product owner, let's say. And then to the development team. But when the management doesn't provide the goal, the strategic goal, then we don't have, like, we are not able to make goals. Well, we can make some goals for us, like we assume that they're right. But yeah, that's why it's difficult for me to state it and write it down.
Okay. Are those related to, yeah, thanks a lot for sharing that. Are those related to features in a sense? Let's build, our goals are, let's build features 1, 2, and 3. Is it something in those terms, or when you say there's multiple goals that you're working on?
It's more or less like components.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's good at least you have those, right? But here it's more like if you want to stay connected with our stakeholders or the business outcomes that our company wants, it's good to have a goal in mind, the goal of the product. We can even begin at the top and start from the company's vision and the company's strategic goals and see simply how our work on our product ties back to those. Otherwise, we just might be lost.
Because what I believe is that we need to have access to the strategic goals Otherwise, that's what you said, we're lost, and that's what's happening in the company. I'm there, even though I'm trying to get the goals from them. It's just if the management doesn't provide the goals to us, then we have just tasks to complete based on some requirements from delivery teams.
Yeah, and what is your role in that organization?
Scrum Master.
Scrum Master, okay, yeah. I've really had some fun conversations when I started going around the company and asking this question. Hey, what's our current goal? And then, yeah, sometimes we had wonderful conversations. For instance, one of the teams I worked with, they learned about a totally new group of users which they weren't aware of. And it was a great team. It was a compact team, well-rounded. They were happy to work together, worked on a great product. But for years, they were unaware of a whole group of users, right? Until simply that question was asked. And another thing is, if we really want to have sprint goals defined, if you're working in sprints, that is, we want to tie those back to a product goal, which is a longer term goal, right? So unless we have a product goal, it's really hard to come up with the sprint goals. Otherwise, it could be just a compound, hey, let's build that and that, component or that and that feature in a sprint.
That's what actually is happening, and what they have versions. So they need to produce every year 2 versions. And that's basically their goal. And what you put in there, well, it's up to you.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, as it is said, context is king. So I don't know, maybe it totally makes sense in your context, but if it doesn't, then you might want to explore just searching somewhere, for some goals that you can tie your work to, right? Anyways, it's good if you have, mind you, the first one, this goal, be the first to launch a mobile phone with only one button, was from Samsung until Apple beat them and launched the first iPhone. And then this would be a mission goal, which was used in World War II. And as you see there, it's not just secure one bridge. It's secure bridges, road junctions, and other locations in Normandy that will allow the ground invasion forces to advance inland. So it's good to have some intent as part of your longer term goal. So try to keep that in mind, or maybe have some conversation if you feel that something like that is lacking in your context. Okay, so Alexander, we would have maybe about 10-15 more minutes to go if everyone is up for it. I hope that's okay. Am I right? 10-15 more minutes?
Yeah.
Super. Let me give you another thing to think about. So what attributes do your product backlog items have? If you're tired typing, you can just call them out. However, it's the simplest. I like to have this discussion, just observe these from this angle. So, and maybe something which you would avoid. So attributes of your product backlog items might help. And we've heard a few, for instance, oh, super, some are already coming up. Acceptance criteria and story points estimated. Okay, which of those would go to always use? In my experience, it's not the best approach to always use certain type of attributes because it might burden and simply lessen the value of the attribute if they're always needed. But yeah, I love some of these. So you might say, we can recommend that we always have the why. I loved that, whoever put that up. We should have a title, right? Maybe a description. Order, right? Someone mentioned we always need to have acceptance criteria. Could be a good idea. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just something to think about. For instance, I've worked with a team which needed to provide a cause for every bug which was discovered in the system. And mind you, that was related to the production bugs. But anyways, so there was a field which was mandatory and you needed to fill it out. And when you didn't know the actual reason, or simply the offered list didn't cover the actual reason, that you would choose other. And then over time, there was a bunch of bugs from production which had the reason other. Yeah, simply because it was a mandated field in the work ticket management system. So maybe the approach would be, or the guidance would be, start with little things which are always necessary, such as why we need something. Have a title, small description, make sure that it's clearly ordered. And yeah, acceptance criteria is always good. And then you might want to think about, I don't know, here we mentioned story points. I'm not sure if you insist on having story points or any type of size for that matter. Always present. In some teams I work with, for instance, production bug is never estimated. You just need to fix it immediately. So we can talk about what's required for the bug to be fixed, or we might argue the importance or the urgency or the impact, but there's no need to, to size it or estimate it. You just need to fix it. So anyways, keep in mind that maybe not all of the attributes are mandatory for all of your product backlog items. You might want to include, let me just see if it's on there. Yeah, I don't see the term value. Correct me if I'm wrong, but value is a good thing to observe. What's the value of working on this? Someone wrote before that we order the product backlog items based on the value. So I saw it was mentioned, but yeah, value might be good. Risk is also a good thing that you might consider. Steps to reproduce. I don't know if we have it here. But yeah, for instance, the bugs, it's good if the bug report contains steps to reproduce, right? Yeah, I see there's some reasons like in, out of scope, exceptions. Yeah, those are all good. Yeah, the guidance is just pay attention of what attributes you're using in your with your product backlog items. Let's do 1, 2 more maybe. Yeah. We mentioned this, and I promised that we would address this. So what is product backlog refinement mean to you? Sorry, what does? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. So reviewing the requirement, reviewing the asks, and determine how best to approach it. And you're also mentioning their solutions, right? So you might do some ideation, some solutioning, some design. The guidance in the Scrum Guide, which is somewhat useful for me, is use product backlog refinement to get an item to a ready state, meaning that you're comfortable with taking it into the sprint on your sprint planning event. But in my experience, what's most often underused, I mean, two elements in the Scrum Guide. One is the sprint review, and then another one is product backlog refinement. Every team I worked with had improvement areas within those two. Yeah, invite to discussion, keep items up to date, right? Really nice ones. So it's about actually socializing the items, right? With your team, with your stakeholders. You might invite users, you might discuss order, you might even decide to remove some of the stuff, right? Because you might think of dependencies and you might determine that something is just not worthwhile the investment, right? And you might say, no, it's better if we just build a component. Oh, sorry, if we just buy a component versus us building it. Someone mentioned here, just a bit previously, so we might do some product discovery there, right? We might determine if we start with the goal in mind and then have some intent also in front of us, then we might think about how we want to approach something, how we want to implement a feature in order to get to the best learning or to get to the best outcomes. So yeah, keep in mind, it's quite often underused. Just activity that you can have with your team. So the product backlog refinement. And maybe a question for you. Does everyone need to be there at the product backlog refinement? Does the whole team need to be there at the refinement? Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so it's refining product backlog items by adding details, get them ready for sprint planning. Yeah. Add details, break them down, do some sizing, right? Discuss value. Those are all good discussion points for product backlog refinement. But yeah, just to go back to the question, does everyone need to be there at every instance of product backlog refinement?
Nope.
Yeah. Does anyone else have a different take?
I think so. I've had small teams and we have lead developers, SMEs, QA, product owners, and so we have a full discussion and looking at the issue or the asks from a 360 degrees. We determine if it's broken down, if it's high value, can it wait? Maybe it's not possible because of technology or another team is doing something that we have to wait for. But we make decisions really quickly, and then the teams will then take ownership over the solution. I mean, it's better than going back and forth to the SMEs. It's better than, adding more meetings to your calendar, going down to the customer. If we have somebody that's an actual user, bringing them in to make sure that we are refining the ask and what the objective is once it is done. And that also comes out with what the acceptance criteria. And as they're having those discussions, the QA team's already working on a plan for doing all of their QA piece, which, is manual regression, performance testing at every stage of the development. And it helps out the developers because then they can then take some of those and then do the refinement of their code and code review, making sure that they're focused on it passing before it even gets to the QA and the UAT.
Yeah,
That's been
I
my
mean,
experience. I mean,
no, that is great.
we turn around product within every 2 weeks, we deploy.
Yeah, that is good to hear. Just there's this notion of product owner refining the product backlog themselves. For instance, in the case of my to-do list for our vacation, I was the one who came up with the first few items on the list, and then I might have spoken with my spouse about that, and we might have added detail and checked on progress and did those kind of activities. So it's the team who should decide. So if it makes sense for the whole team to be there, but if it's really a big team, like you have maybe 10, 12 people working on a team, not all of them might need to be there. It's okay that few members just do one piece of refinement of a product backlog item. It's also the product owner does it by themselves with certain team members, with stakeholders, with SMEs, and so forth. So it doesn't have to be a rigid structure for refining your product backlog. The alignment around the understanding that needs to take place, right? We need to share what our decisions might have been around certain items like acceptance criteria or the approach to implement or the scope or anything like that with everyone, but not everyone necessarily needs to be there the whole time. Okay, I think we are approaching the end of this session, at least the planned time box for it. So I would move on to the closing a little bit. I would maybe just now skip a few questions. Alexander, if that's okay, I would now again take over sharing.
Of course. We have one question from Idris. Are you sharing the slides, please?
Yeah, I can. Sure.
Yeah.
Alexander, you will know the way how to do that.
Yeah, of course.
So let me see if you can see this. So yeah, I'm just now at the key takeaways, starting the wrap up. Sometimes these things get forgotten, but if you take them into consideration, you will most likely improve the transparency of your product backlog. So search the vision for your product, even if it's not just with one person, and see if you can gather up some statements there, or look up the person who actually initiated the creation of the product. If it's not your product owner, or if it's not you as the product manager or a product owner of a product. See if you can define, or again, search or help the organization define a goal for your product. Make sure that the users are known, and apply some techniques for actually discovering your users with your team. So there is a whole bunch of there which you can explore. Map your stakeholders. Make your sprint reviews event engaging, and really invite the people who actually hold the biggest stake in your product. Otherwise, you might get low attendance or low interaction. Just make sure that the right people are invited to the sprint review. Keep in mind the various PBI formats and levels of decomposition, that you can use different types of attributes on by intent. One thing we didn't get to discuss together, but it's road mapping. So with some stakeholders, it's really a roadmap what you should be taking with you, because the product backlog is too fine-grained for them, right? So you can you can check out these different goal-driven, like, okay, in the next period, we'll be working on that goal, and then after that, that goal, and after that, that next goal. Or maybe see to come up with some high-level product backlog items and put them in the now, next, later type of roadmap. So you can check those out. Based on your stakeholder map or stakeholder mind map, you can create the communication plan. Because we're all aware that just the events, which are, again, in my world, described by the Scrum Guide, so they're not sufficient. You need to keep the conversation going even between those events. So based on the map of your stakeholders, define frequency and the topics and the level of details that you want to take with you as you work as your Scrum Master or a product owner. There's different kinds of techniques for ordering your product backlog. We didn't get to those, but you can think of those. Again, it helps you with the ordering. For instance, if you use the must, should, could, and won't technique, or 2020 vision, so similar techniques, it can help with the ordering. Because, again, to repeat, you cannot implement everything which is asked for. Our resources are always limited. Product backlog refinement. Typically, there's a lot of place to improve there as far as frequency and attendance and the people who are invited and how it's approached simply, and also a sprint review. So you can really generate a lot of good feedback if the right people are invited and if it's really an engaging and collaborative session, and which you can take into your product backlog. And that's an ongoing basis, right? Which out of all will increase the transparency of your product backlog. I prepared 1 or 2 quiz questions. We can just take one. So out of these 4, which I think is the best answer to the question? So which list has the most valuable items for discussion in a good sprint review? You can type your answer in the chat. So one last activity together. So either C or D. Yeah, thanks for providing your answers. For me, C would be the most correct answer because all the others have some terms which stand out a little bit. For instance, project status. If we think about how product development works and to what Scrum is attuned for, it would be product development. It wouldn't be actually project delivery. So project delivery would be considered simply a discipline, a separate one from product development. Velocity is also, we might argue, a circumstantial metric. So yeah, D wouldn't be totally right. If you have all those and it works for you, then you might as well, just keep using them. But yeah, you might want to try C. So see if a product vision is known and just bring that up. And, who knows, maybe sprint review might be the best place to start discussing it if there isn't one which is already defined. Come up with a product goal, start with some simple. It's not easy, as some of you have mentioned, but yeah, just give it a try. It's not going to be perfect, but any is better than none. You might talk about budgets, how far we can go, how much more sprints, if you're working in sprints, how much more sprints we can go. Check out some product usage analytics. check our sprint goal. Yeah, maybe discuss roadmap. Again, as we said, there might be stakeholders which require different level of details for them to get some value. Anyways, I've enjoyed delivering this to you, and I hope you found some value in our little session. Alexander, I think you can now take over.
Of course. Yeah, guys. This was very inspiring and very useful, I have to admit, really. It was very interactive. Even I didn't expect interaction like this. So guys, thank you. You were amazing. Really, you give your best to cooperate with Vladimir and try to find out some useful stuff which are going to help you in your daily duties. When it comes about slides, for all of those who would like to have the slides shared, please, you can contact me through the Meetup group, or I can just simply send you the link of my LinkedIn. So there we can share email addresses, and I will be able to send you slides once after I get those slides from Vladimir. So here is my LinkedIn. It's in the chat, so you can add me, and then you can ask for the slides, and I'm going to give you, since the Meetup group doesn't have option to attach the slides or something like that. So feel free to contact me, and I will give you. Oh, I accidentally sent that only to Sarka, so give me 1 minute. Yeah, this should work right now.
Yeah, so
So
thank you all from my side for taking part.
Thank you one more time. I'm going to stop the recording since the session is over. Thank you one more time.